Welcome to the Grit Growth Podcast. Commit to conquer, lead your life, leave a legacy, gather your grit, and let's get after it.
Good morning.
How are you, my man?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
I can hear you.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. I'm Carson. Nice to meet you formally.
Oh, yeah. Same here, man.
So my co-host had something come up this morning, so he's not going to be joining us. It's just us today. But yeah, so man, I love your message. I gotta just give you props and kudos. I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's so symbiotic with what I'm trying to do here with Grit Growth, and it totally aligns. So I'm really glad that our mutual friend Jeremy put us together, and I really appreciate you taking the time to chat. So with that being said, do you want to, if you don't mind, can you just introduce yourself and give like a quick background of, what the problem is you're trying to solve, and how you got to where you are, and what you're trying to do about it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, a few years ago, I started to look at how the media portrayed dads, in particular Black dads. There was always this negative connotation to how Black dads are, things that Black dads do, and just in general, dads altogether. I always use the example of cartoons. You would see in a cartoon a dad with the kids, and say for instance, the mom would go to the grocery store and she'll say, "Okay, guys, I'll be back." And she leaves the kids with the dad. And by the time the mom comes back home, the whole house is burnt down because the dad is just so inept. He can't, possibly take care of his children without burning the house down or doing something. It just always made us seem like we were goofy or something, man.
Right.
And I'm like, that's not me. That's not me. That's not a lot of guys that I know. We're very responsible. We take pride in taking care of our homes, taking care of our children, loving our family. Just the picture in the media has always been dads not being, all we are providers.
Right.
And I just truly believe, and I see that we are much more than that. Before I started the podcast, this was a few years ago on a February, I was like, you know what? For each day of February, for the 28 days, I'm going to highlight a different Black dad for the day. And That's what I did. And I had so much trouble picking which dad because I know so many.
Right.
I was like, man, and I had like a whole list, and I'm like, man, I'm going to forget some people. And from there, I was like, man, I got an entire list. And I'm telling the people's story on my Facebook, but I'm like, man, I wish I could get these guys to tell their own stories. And so that people can hear it from the mouths of these men. And so that's where the idea of the podcast came in. I'm like, you know what? I would love to sit down with each one of these dads and interview them and ask them about their journey with fatherhood. And that's kind of where it started, man. And now I am 96 dads in.
Awesome.
After about 2.5 years. So, man, it's been amazing to hear the stories, to learn from all of these different dads, to make these connections. And I believe that it's truly beginning to change. The narrative surrounding fatherhood is literally changing right in front of my eyes because people are now seeing that, you know what, he was right. There are many dads out here who have all types of stories, single dads that you never hear about.
Right.
Guys that are in long distance relationships with their children, dads that are non-custodial, don't live with their children, just all these different things, man. And it's been great.
Man, you're hit the nail on the head for sure, and it's a righteous cause that you're working toward, no doubt. Have you ever heard of the Order of Man podcast? Are you familiar with that?
I've never heard of that one.
Okay, he's kind of got a little bit of a similar message. It's about basically restoring and reclaiming masculinity, but he puts a word there in front of it. I forget what he says, but basically he fights against the whole notion of, toxic masculinity, and, that's not saying that that's not really a thing, which I totally agree with him on that. And
Mhm.
his is an interview based show, and it's less about fatherhood, although that's a component, and it's a lot of it is more about just basically maximizing your potential as a man, a leader in the household primarily. That's number one, but then also a leader in the community, and just basically being the best you can be in all that you do. So, man, he's interviewed some really amazing men. There's some really super inspiring stories there. One of them that jumps out at me was Terry Crews. Terry
Mm.
Crews just published a book, kind of a autobiography kind of book, I
Mhm.
think, and just kind of chronicling the struggles that he went through, in his super successful acting career, which, and that, that's one thing that I try to look at with my platform is that people see him as an actor, right? And, famous and rich and everything that comes with it, and say to themselves, oh, it must be nice, to have all this stuff and have all this money. But if you read that book and you listen to his story, I mean, decades of struggle, with addiction and mental illness um, and problems with his family, problems with his wife,
Mhm.
real people struggles that your 10-second, Instagram story doesn't give it, when you're climbing in your
Yeah.
Maserati or whatever, it doesn't do justice to what you went through to get there. So
Mm.
anyway, there's some really inspiring stories there, and it's totally in line with what you're talking about. So
I love
um,
that.
yeah, something to maybe check out. Um, yeah,
And that was the
so
order of dad?
order of man is
Order of
what
man.
is what
Okay.
he
Order
calls
of
it. Yeah,
man.
protect, provide, preside. So he talks about the protection aspect, obviously, and then the provider, which is what you said, which is interesting. It could be a negative connotation if that's all you're doing, right? Because
Yeah.
that's not,
Yeah.
but he would agree that that's not enough. That's not
Yeah.
the sole purpose, right? Protect,
Hmm.
provide, and then preside is the leadership aspect of it. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's his thing. Order of Man. It's good. He's got a lot of really good interviews on there. That show is part of my inspiration for starting a podcast because I really love the long form deep dive that you can get out of an interview and really get to know somebody. I feel like I've built relationships on this
Yeah.
platform that you can't get on social media, or if you meet somebody walking or at an event or something, you hand them a
Yeah.
business card, that's not a real relationship. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love this. This has been good so far, which I'm only you're let's see, you'll be number 16. So
Okay.
still
Fresh in
new,
the
still
game.
fresh.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad. I mean, you're seasoned. Hopefully, part of doing this to me too is selfishly. I hope to gain insight from people like you. Obviously, not just grit, but like you've got almost 100 podcasts. And I'm
Hmm.
I'm probably going to hopefully pick up some podcasting skills, even if it's not
Yeah.
even subconsciously. So uh,
Yeah.
yeah, would you say has that been the dads you interviewed? Is that part of your motivation too, like rubbing off on you?
Man, listen, I'm always trying to learn. I just did one last night. I I sat down with my younger brother and one of my little cousins, and I was telling them the same thing. I know they look up to me as a dad, and like I was telling them, I'm like, man, listen, I don't know it all. I can learn from you guys too. Just sitting down with them for what 45 to 50 minutes last night.
Yeah.
I learned things, just picking up things here and there, tips. I might talk with someone for 30 minutes, and even if they just say one thing that I can glean from and say, wow, you know what, bro, that's something that I could put into my own fatherhood, and let me do that, let me start practicing that in my own life. Or, I've sat down with other guys that have podcasts and, they told me about different things. And I'm like, man, let me try to get that, and pull from this person and pull from that person, so because it should be, if you're always pouring yourself out and you're never getting poured back into, like, what are you pouring out?
Hmm.
You're giving people, you know, you're not giving anyone anything if you're not getting poured into. So I'm always looking to be poured into and to grab things from all of these different places. So, man, it's been amazing to learn from all of these different guys, from all different walks of life, man. And that's the thing I love the most about the podcast. No one has been the same. Everyone has a different story. Everyone has different experiences. We all are in such different places. We might live in the same place. Some of I interviewed family members, all types of things, but everyone's story is totally different. No one has experienced in the same. We all experience similar things, but no one's story is exactly the same. We all go through different challenges.
Right. Yeah, I love that. You're absolutely right. I've like every podcast so far, it seems like there's been one, the successful people that I've interviewed, the theme of the first season has been all like grit and entrepreneurship. So business leaders, and they've all got one thing in particular that they latch onto, like a mantra that they live by, or one core value, that's non-negotiable, and they run not just their company on it, but they also run their life on it, their personal life. So that's been enlightening. I think it's like that, just having that intentionality, and if you're faced with a problem and you can look at it through that lens of, is this solution, does it jive with my core value that I have told myself I'm not going without, right? Like one guy that I really like, his was do what you say you will do. And he has it all over the office, everywhere, the initials, DWYSYSDW. So it's the same forward and back. So it looks cool. Do what you say you will do. And it's everywhere. And they do everything by that. And it's so simple. It's not like it's rocket science, but and then another guy had relentless. That's his word. That's his thing, relentless. So to them, it's, problem solving. Like there will be no client that brings a problem to us that we can't fix or solve. And it might cost money. I mean, problems cost money to solve, but that's okay, because that's what we get paid to do, is solve problems, and relentlessly, no backing down, no giving up. You know what I'm saying? So that's just two examples, of something like that you can have these conversations or listen to these conversations and pick up that one thing, and they'll stick with you.
That's real, man.
Yeah,
that's some good stuff.
It is good. It's good. So what kind of, so when you're interviewing, what kind of questions are you trying to get to, or do you just kind of let people start in the beginning and kind of tell their story, or where do you go?
I usually start with the first. So there's this podcast. I've been listening to podcasts for years.
Right.
So one of my favorite podcasts is this sports podcast called The Knuckleheads. There's two former NBA players named Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles. And I always like that on their podcast, they start with the same question. And their first question is always, how do they say it? When you first got into the league, the NBA, who was the first person to bust your ass? Or, who was the first person to really, who was your introduction? Who really made you realize, like, okay, this is different. This isn't college. This isn't high school. This isn't the park. This is the NBA. And they start that off with everyone. And it's always interesting to hear the stories that people give, like, oh my God, this one guy in my first game just, it's always just interesting. So when I started podcasting, I said, I got to have a question that I ask everyone, to just get the conversation going. And so for me, my question is, what was your relationship like with your dad? I like to take it back so that I can get an understanding of who is this guy that I'm talking to and how did he get there? And if you find out who his dad was and how his dad raised him, or the lack thereof, if he didn't have a dad like me, that's a very important part of who we are as men. Who were, if you didn't have a dad, who were some of the role models, some of the male role models and male figures in your life that were there for you, and how did they help you as a young man? And just from there, I can go in so many different directions with that one question, depending on how they answer the question. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, if they had a dad, okay, let's go there. Let's talk more about, what he taught you and how are you now implementing things that he taught you in your own parenting style? Or if you didn't have a dad, like how has that affected you growing up? Were there any other men that stepped in, uncles, granddads, guys in the neighborhood, pastors, or whoever the case may be? How did those guys step in and help you to become the man that you are now? And so that first question, just from there, sometimes I don't even have to have a set list of questions. Well, I've gotten to that point now because I do it so much.
Right.
But sometimes that first question just leads me into totally different directions than what I wanted to go. So yeah, it's good to have that first question.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I've been closing with the same question every time, or trying to. Sometimes I miss it, but I've been closing with, what does grit mean to you? Trying to get that kind of introspective, on what meaning does that word bring up out of them. But that's interesting to open with it. I hadn't thought of that. That's a good idea.
I end with the same question. Also, I have a question that I end with. I always ask, if you could sit down with the 18-year-old version of yourself, knowing everything that you know now at this time in your life, what would you say to that young man?
Ooh, yeah, that's
so
a good one.
Yeah, it's always that's one of those ones that really make you think, like, ooh, I wonder, man. So yeah, you can, that one right there is always a good one.
Man, that's really interesting. Gosh, I'd have to think about that for a minute. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll,
because you got to really think, when we were 18, a lot of us thought, oh, I'm a man now.
Right.
Oh, I know what I'm doing. And, if you went to college or whatever you did, at times we really thought like we knew it all. We had it figured out.
Yeah.
And now, that I'm 33 now, I look back to the 18-year-old version of myself like, bro, listen.
Yeah. There's one, I want to say it's Chris Rock has a stand-up skit where at some point he's talking to somebody in the front row, and he says, and me and my wife joke about this all the time, just like how naive, in like stages before you get married, before you have kids, you're so naive and you don't know it. And Chris Rock, he asked this guy, hey, how old are you? And he says, I think he hollers out 23 or 25. And Chris Rock just yells at him and says, 25. You don't know shit. You don't know shit. But it's so true. You don't know what you don't know until, it whacks you in the head.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good stuff. So I'm interested to hear. So like when you asked that question, when you grew up, did you have, what was your fatherhood situation like in your house growing up? The ones that maybe didn't have the best relationship with the father, but he was present, or maybe he lived there, but he didn't go to, but there was no relationship, that kind of thing. Maybe the type that only was a provider financially and nothing else. Do you see a correlation there of men growing up and repeating that cycle, or do you see them like pendulum swing the other way to try to get away from that? What would you say is more common?
I think a lot of guys I know in my age group, I think we're more aware nowadays, because of the information available to us. I think a lot of us now know that I got to do better. I like my kids need more than me to just provide. But there are some guys, I've talked with guys, for example, I talked with the guy at my job one day. He was a manager and he was trying to talk me into getting into management. And at the time, I'm like, I'm not really into that, especially here. I'm kind of trying to get out of this line of work. And he was telling me, about the money he's making, and how he does this, he does that, and he could buy his wife this and buy his kid that. And then he says to me, when I go home and my son wants to throw the football with me, I tell my son to take his ass to the room because I need to get rest so I can go back to work the next day. And I'm like, I think you just lost me.
Yeah, you
You
just missed
lost
it.
me with that one. You definitely, like, I don't want that for myself. I don't want that for my son, my daughters. I don't even want that for my wife.
Right.
For me to be so boggled down, so heavy laden and burdened with the cares of life and the world to the point where I can't even spend time, go outside and throw the football with my son.
Mm.
It's not worth it, but there are a lot of men that feel like, that's my main priority.
Yeah.
I am going to take care of my family. I'll be able to buy my family whatever. We can go on trips when it's time to go on trips, which is it's a good thing.
Right.
But how valuable is your time and your home, opposed to being able to buy things? I didn't grow up with my dad. There was a short period in my life where my dad was like really active. I wouldn't say really active, but he was doing a little better in his life around that time. And one thing I never remembered anything my dad bought me. Like, I'm more than sure he has brought me things at times, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember that stuff. But
Right.
what I do remember, I remember my dad taking me to the beach, to St. Augustine Beach, to Crescent Beach. I remember him taking me to these restaurant called Ryan's that is like non-existent nowadays, a restaurant called Quincy's. I remember him taking me to Bob Evans, and I had the little dinosaur chicken nuggets. Like, I remember all these things vividly
Right.
from the times that the experiences. Like, I never forget this stuff. I think that was like maybe third grade, fourth grade, but I remember it so vividly because, man, those were times that I did go out spending with my dad. I remember he took me and my oldest brother to a basketball court one day, and we were all just out there playing one-on-one. I remember being in the car with him and how he would drive. He would always lean a certain way with the one arm. I remember all these things. The one time that I did spend the night at his house when he had a place, and he cooked me some tacos and he was chopping the cheese up. I never forget these things.
Yeah.
Even though my dad wasn't an active dad, he just had a lot of issues, just a lot of different things that he had going on. But for that short period of time that my dad was in my life, being active in that way, I remember almost every time he came to pick me up. I remember it all. When we went to the movie theater, I think we went to see Independence Day or something like that. All of these different things that happen, I remember it. And that's the one thing that I always tell guys, we can buy our kid. That's, of course, it's a good thing to be able to buy your kids things and do things for them, but they will always remember the experiences that you make, that you create with them. The time spent will be much more valuable in the end than the money spent, when you're on your deathbed and your kids, are about to send you on to transition to the next phase.
Right.
They will always remember those experiences. They're not going to remember, oh, my dad bought me a Tonka toy. They're not going to even think about that stuff, man.
That's right.
So,
well, you can, and you can leave them money, right, in an inheritance, but you can't leave them more experiences with you.
Wow. Never, man. That's crazy.
Yeah. That's a really good perspective. My whole grit growth, I guess my primary audience that I'm trying to reach, is it primarily is like a fresh high school graduate, a fresh college graduate, a new professional in the workforce, and mostly the message has been, don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to discover, right? You need to have a discovery phase of life and not just get caught up in the first thing that you come to. And then the next thing is, the grass is not always greener somewhere else. When you come to the very first struggle, the reflex, or the knee-jerk reaction shouldn't be to jump ship and go work for somebody else. The knee-jerk reaction should be to put your head down and grind through it. Because that struggle is what builds the strength and builds the relationships that will serve you later. And if you just abandon it every time, you're going to miss those opportunities. You're going to actually take longer to develop jumping around than you would if you grind, right?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I say all that just to set up a little background to say that what you're talking about with uh, the guys or men who um, go into that only provider mode and don't have any balance in their life. They don't have the time to take care of their family, in the mental and emotional aspects.
Mm.
That's a whole different aspect of grit that I would say it takes both, grit in the
Mm-hmm.
workplace to grind it out when you need to, but
Yeah.
grit is also discipline to shut that off and go
Mm.
give your family what they need, right?
Yeah.
And that can be a grind too, not so much in a bad way of overcoming something, but if you've got work back here nagging at you and eating at you in the back of your mind, right? And but
Mm.
you know that right now this kid needs me at this soccer game or this basketball game or just to throw the baseball in the backyard.
Mm.
That could be a grind too, to be deliberate enough in your brain, right? Just make that choice to put that moment first and turn the switch off at work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's such a critical aspect of grit. I think that when we've been talking about just on focused more heavily on entrepreneurship, um, that's an aspect that can get missed. That's
Mm-hmm.
just as important or maybe more important. So so I guess that kind of leads me to a question. The ones that the men, let's just say like the top 10%, right? Of, it's not very easy to define, but the guys that really have it together, their
Mm-hmm.
families are super happy, they're successful at work, they, like you said, they've got the stuff and the experiences and that's all great, but they've also got the balance and they're happy. Um, those types of men, how would you describe they get there, or what's the it factor, what's that thing that they have that other people just can't seem to tap into, after all your 100 interviews almost, where are they deriving that secret key to life that other people can't seem to find?
It makes me think about one of my friends that I interviewed on the podcast. He's pretty well off, and I've had two or three of them on there that were like some of my personal friends that were well off, and I think for them, it's the it's like a dedication to what they do. They to this off the top of my mind, I know they both, they went to school, they were focused on what they were doing. I think also one of them in particular, he actually, like when he graduated, he did really good in high school. This is like one of my friends from way back in second grade. We go that far back. So I watched him, and where he is in his life right now, he's doing so well. But I remember even back in ninth grade, we had when we first got to high school, we were both in the honors classes. And if you look at me and you look at him, we were on two opposite sides because he was so focused on what he was doing. I was distracted.
Hmm.
And, I struggled for those first two semesters. And I remember he used to always be on me and just tell me, I used to tell him, man, I can't do this stuff, man. I can't do this work. I just want to go back to mainstream classes. I don't want to be in anything honors. And he used to always tell me, it's not that you can't do it, bro. You're not focused.
Hmm.
You clown around in class. I do all of these different things. And, I ended up talking my mom and talking they advisors, teachers, and everyone just take me out, man. It's not for me,
Right.
and looking back, I can say I can agree with my friend. It wasn't that I couldn't do the work. I just wasn't focused, and I didn't want to focus. I was so stuck in my ways and stubborn
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't want to hear the teachers. The teachers would always tell me, Anthony, you have potential. You just don't work up to your potential.
Mm.
I'm like, no, you don't understand. I can't do it. And I used to tell myself that all the time. And now it's like I look at my friend now. He ended up graduating high school, going to the University of Florida, just doing all of these great things. And, you know, now he's married, he has 2 kids, and he's just doing so good. We're still friends to this day. And, you know, I look at decisions that he made, you know, like I just got my bachelor degree in December of last year.
Oh, congrats.
Yeah, thank you. But it's like I feel like at times I'm so behind on things that I should have been done these types of things, but it took me this long because in my earlier years, you know, I wasn't focused. I wasn't playing. But I look at my friend and he just, you know, he went to college, you know, just did it right after, you know, just did what he needed to do to get that out of the way. And, you know, then he got married. Him and his wife went to the same school. And then, you know, they had kids and they were more established. So that like they did things in a more, it was just a way that you really have to do at times. Not saying that if you are in a position like me, you can't get to those places still, but it just makes everything harder. So now I'm reaping the benefits of the things that I did back then. Mm-hmm. And I look at what he's reaped over the years, and I'm just like always like, man, I'm so proud of my boy, you know, for doing the things that he did, because he's like a picture to me of like why our parents tell us certain things.
Right.
You know, like this is why the parents tell you, you know, to just get the education out of the way. And, you know, then you can worry about, you know, the kids and the marriage and all of that, you know. So it's like, I think for a lot of guys in those situations like that, you know, like you say, the top 5% of guys, if you really look at their lives, a lot of them, for one, a lot of them don't have kids. A lot of them waited a little later in life to have kids. A lot of them wait later to get married. You know, they do things with certain steps. And I think, and even when I look at my friend, he also had a dad there in the house. So he had the guidance. He grew up in a...
So maybe some of that focus wasn't all from internal.
Yeah.
It was forced focus a little bit. He had that guidance from home. Yeah.
He had a 2-parent home, you know, and to have that guidance is everything.
Yeah.
You know, it can be everything.
Especially like we were talking about when you're young and naive and you don't know what you don't know. You don't know where your life's going. Having that forced focus. Yeah. In Grit, we talk a lot about vigilance, and it's the same. It's the conscientiousness to, you know, remain disciplined, keep that focus, that goal oriented, you know, whatever it is, or even vigilance to run, you know, operate your day in a organized and efficient manner to get done the things you need to get done for work, and make sure you have time for your kids at night, or you know, I'm gonna knock off today at 4 so I can throw the ball with my boy, right? So that's focus and discipline and vigilance too. So it's a transferable skill, I think. I mean, I know it is. It's if you can apply it to one thing, you can apply it to anything. And like you're saying, you can learn it and apply it a little bit later in life and still get those results. And you might have wished you would have started sooner, but but starting now is better than not.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Right. So that's another big message for Grit Growth. Absolutely. That vigilance part, the discipline, you know, it goes back to the balance. That makes the balance possible. If you're at work, you know, and you're kind of half-assing it and kind of goofing off all day and, you know, shooting the breeze at the water cooler or what have you, you're not getting your stuff done. You know, how many guys say they have to work late, or think, not even consciously, probably a lot of them, they think they have to work late, but they really goofed off for about 2 or 3 hours out of the 8. They could have had that stuff done, and they could have been ahead for tomorrow.
Exactly.
If they would have put their head down again, like I was talking about the grind, you know, that's not, it's a dirty word. It kind of sounds, you know, it doesn't sound pleasant, but the reward of it is pleasant. You know, that's the delayed gratification. That's where you got to get to. It's a mindset switch, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You said one other thing right there I wanted to come back to, and I'm trying to remember what it was. Dang it. I lost it. It was perfect. It was one other thing I wanted to tie into the grit, the four. But anyway, if I think of it, we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
But anyways, so yeah, I mean, I've got two kids. So you can definitely say this is number 98 if you want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, two kids and a wife. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what that thing was. It was good. Hate that. Hate it when that happens.
Yeah, man, listen, it happens all the what I've learned, because I forget stuff so much. I'm in the middle of a conversation. So
Yeah.
now what I'll do sometimes, like I had to do it one time last night while they were talking, I was like, oh, I want to come back to that. So what I did is I got my phone and I just text messaged it like to a random number so that I could go back to the message and say, okay, this is right here.
Yeah,
I'll
that's
write
what it
down
was.
like okay, yeah, man. Like
Yeah.
I have to do that all the
I
time,
got to
man.
get better about that. Yeah, when I my co-host when
Hmm.
we we'll open up the chat thing on Zoom sometimes
Yeah,
and hit like I want to jump in here or something, but
yeah.
yeah, I just this one, dang it, I lost it.
And sometimes like even having like a pen and some paper, and I'll
Yeah.
write down like one word, like he might say something about work, and I'll write down
Yeah.
remember work,
Right.
and then when it's time for me to talk, I'll be like, okay, I remember
Yeah.
that
Just need
I
a
want
little
to talk.
trigger, something to trigger. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so let's talk business for a second. If since I'm really interested in more like psychology of fatherhood right now based on this conversation. But
Mm,
going back to my, me needing to be vigilant and focused on my goal right now too. Uh,
mm.
the business side is the podcast your main priority? Is that your sole venture? Is it like a side
No.
hustle right now?
So right now, I'm not getting paid from it. I mean, I get paid for my merch.
Mm,
I print out shirts and stuff.
okay.
So I sell my shirts. So that's really where the money that I do make from it comes in at.
Hmm.
Um, because what I found is that, in order to get the sponsorships and all of that type of stuff, you got to have like this, you got to be able to have the numbers to show.
Hmm.
So at times, they want to see some real concrete numbers. And I haven't really done too much of like marketing and all that types of stuff because podcasting really was it was this side thing that I was doing.
Hmm.
And when I first started, I'm like, man, I just want to tell the stories of dads. In my spare time, I sit down with dads and I tell these stories. And it's starting now to get a little more view. At first, I think when I first started, because I was in school when I first started, so
Hmm.
I was going to school full time. I was working full time. Had 3 kids, married,
Hmm.
starting a podcast. I started a side business where I do logo work and business
Okay.
card designs and all that. So I was doing like millions of things all at
Yeah.
once, and podcasting was just one part of it. And I think when I first started, so I started to look at I had to do research on podcasting.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, I'm a little behind the 8 ball as far as um there was a big hump I would have to overcome because when I did the study on who listens to podcasts and my target audience,
Mm.
my target audience is black dads, overall, like in general, like I really, really, really wanted to reach black dads.
Right.
But what I found is out of all listenership, I think black men listen to podcasts the least
Mm.
out of all demographics.
Wow.
And I was like, oh crap. That's a bad target group to have.
Right.
But I was like, you know what? I'll still go at it. And I can understand the percentages because when you really look at it, I think the people that listen to podcasts most were you know, Caucasian men who were more fluent.
Mm.
And I'm like, that makes sense. It makes a lot of sense because a lot of people, listen to podcasts. They're learning. They're more of learning things. If a black man does listen to podcasts, a lot of times we're listening to sports. Sports, football, basketball. Or we're listening to something comedy wise. Many people aren't going to podcasts to look for family stuff, fatherhood. That's just not really a thing.
Right.
For one, men don't talk most of the time. That's not really our thing, especially black men. We're not really talking that much to one another, especially about, some real things.
Personal.
We're really, personal things. We're kind of to ourselves. Right. But I'm like, I want to change that.
Yeah.
Like
I was literally say, is that part of the problem?
That's a big thing. So, like when I first started, I would tell people I got a podcast, and a lot of times they're like, what's a podcast? I'm like, oh Lord. So that it's been a problem that I've run into. Even with like family members, like my mom is like, what's a podcast?
Yeah.
Aunts and people are like, podcasts are much more popular in 2022 right now than it was back when I was first thinking about a podcast, which was like 2018. Bro, it was like people were like really like, what is a podcast? I've never even heard of that.
Right.
So that's been a thing. So the numbers came slow, like really, really, really slow to try and get to the point to where I got subscribers on my YouTube. I think this year alone, I finally just started posting all of my videos. So I think this year I've probably gained about 70 to 80 subscribers just because I started putting it out there more.
Right.
And, giving those call to actions to people, go and subscribe to the podcast, please, to the channel. And so when you start to get, the subscriber numbers on YouTube, you can't even monetize until you get to 1,000. So that's the thing, can't monetize on YouTube until I get to that point.
Yeah, that's a bunch. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
that's a lot, man.
Absolutely.
So got a lot of. I think I'm at like 96 right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot
per podcast.
Seriously, man. So
yeah,
and I think in the beginning I wasn't, me. I literally listened to podcasts. That's what I like. I wasn't even into like YouTube and stuff. Like I really listened to audio podcasts.
Right.
And people would say, where's the video? I'm like, what video? It's a podcast. Because people didn't understand that podcasts are audio.
Right.
Nowadays everyone is doing video, incorporating video with it. Because I mean, you should in this time. Yeah. Because some people want to see the visual, but I'm like, I don't even look at videos. I want a podcast so I can put my phone in my pocket and go running, work out while I'm at work. I can, just listen. I'm a person that likes to hear things. But so that's been that's been the challenge of being able to really go into the business side is having those numbers to show. But I've sold a lot of shirts. I've sold a lot of shirts, man.
Good.
So that's been a big thing so far. I think I probably sold 200, almost maybe 200, 300 shirts so far.
Wow.
So it's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you have a really catchy name. It grabs attention. So that's got to help. I think when I was, like you said, I did market research also before when I had the idea to start a podcast, and the podcast numbers overall have been steadily growing, and guys like Joe Rogan, obviously he's a huge one. Yeah. Have really helped to bring it more mainstream and get more publicity. And I mean, I think there's people that get their news from Joe Rogan and have quit watching the news, so that helps a lot.
Yeah. Big time.
Yeah, but you definitely have an awesome message. I mean, I think it's just a matter of time. You keep putting it out there and it's going to take off. I really believe that, because you're absolutely right. There's a problem. There's a negative connotation, and it's dads in general, and different types of parenting. There's all kinds of stuff that you can get into. And I think you're onto something big, without a doubt.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't know how big that Order of Man is, but it's pretty big. And it's maybe a little bit more broad, but not very much more broad than what you are. So,
Yeah.
and I'm white, obviously a white Caucasian dad, but I still, everything you're saying is totally in line with what I think about the way things are too. It's
Yes,
not like,
sir.
we might have differences, but we need to be
Not big.
having these
Yeah.
conversations.
Seriously.
There's no reason why we can't learn from each other. and, we may disagree on little bits and pieces here and there, but for the most part, we got the same goals. We got the
Yeah.
same problems and we got the same goals,
Seriously. Seriously.
and
Yeah, and it was funny one time, I think once I was about 15 episodes in, um, I was surprised at one point. I think my HR manager at my job caught wind of the podcast,
oh boy.
and he was like, he's an older white guy, and he was like, he saw me at work one day. He was like, Anthony, hey man, I listened to that podcast, and I'm thinking, huh? He was like, man, I really love the podcast, and I really love what you're doing. And we went to talking. He was telling me how he had adopted, 2 children. I was like, wow, man. I was like, bro, I would love to have you come on the podcast, sit down and talk with you sometime. And he was like, man, listen, just give me a date. I was
Yeah.
like, let's do it, bro.
Yeah.
So I think he
Yeah.
was like maybe episode 15 or 14 or something like that.
Nice.
And yeah, man. And then I think right after that, this one white guy from way out in Seattle reached out to me. I'm way in Florida.
Yeah.
He reached out to me on Instagram, and he was like, hey, listen, man, I really love what you're doing. I would love to be a guest. I was like, bro, listen, give me a date.
Yeah.
Give me a date and time, and we can make that happen. So, and I always tell people, like, my target audience is like, just black dads.
Right.
But like, it's not exclusive to that.
Yeah.
But like, I just really wanted to change the narrative around black fatherhood to let people know that, there's some really good black dads out here, man, and we're not what is, our dads had a bad reputation because a lot of our dads they weren't there. A lot of guys that I know and grew up with, our dads weren't there. Mm-hmm. But my generation, we are like, bro, we are doing everything to make sure we're not our dads.
Right.
Everything possible because we know what it was like. And we have a greater understanding of what our dads went through and the things that, there's a lot of reasons why they weren't there. Things we don't even have to get into, but there's a lot of reasons. And so now my generation, we're going to change that. And that's what I see. Right. And so I was like, man, you know what? I want to show people that, man, there's so many good dads out here, man. And I want to highlight these guys and give them the opportunity. And so many of these guys, when I reach out to them, guys in the neighborhood that people won't even think to talk to, I give them the opportunity to come on a podcast, and they just feel like, it's funny. I reached out to a guy a couple of weeks ago. I was like, hey man, I want to bring you on the podcast. I see what you're doing. And I just want to I want to sit down with you and let you tell your story. This guy was so like, it was like, the White House called him or something. He was like, oh my God, bro, I'm so thankful. And for him, it's like, wow, like someone actually sees me, Right. To him, it's like, I'm nobody. Like, you want to sit down with me and date people in my neighborhood, in our community in Gainesville, Florida. I'm starting to become, most people know about the podcast now. So it's a big thing to guys. And they're like always so honored that I get an opportunity to tell my story, because a lot of people don't know what I go through on a daily. And, they're like I say, it's like the White House call. And I'm like, bro, I'm just a normal dude. Right. This is a normal podcast. But to them, it's everything because finally, I have a chance to tell my side of the story. Yeah. So it's been a good thing. That's why I really, really like to get those stories so that people hear them. But man, white dads, I've had a few Hispanic dads on. Yeah. And just trying to make sure, like, I want all the stories. I want the story of fatherhood, period. Yeah. Because we all get, like I say, the cartoon, that's everyone. Right. They make dads look like we are just the most biggest losers, man.
Yeah, incapable. Yeah. Right. Can't cook, can't
cook. Yeah.
Yeah. just fall off a ladder, whatever. Just yeah.
So
But
goofy,
you know
man.
the fatherhood problems too are, again, there's no racial line between,
Exactly.
you know, alcoholism, drug addiction,
Yeah.
the work addiction, you
Mm,
know, people that get addicted to pornography. There's all kind of
so many things.
reasons why dads might be, you know, whatever you want to call it, missing or inactive, or you
Mm,
know, none of that stuff has anything to do with race, and it has everything to do with just just being
mm,
human, right? And we all have the same tendencies, we have the same chemicals in our brains and nerves firing, and you know, we react to situations and to dopamine, and
mm,
we react to all that stuff the same. You know, it's we're all human. So, and through a grit lens, you know, looking at it through that filter, it's like if you grow up without a father or without a good relationship with your father, you
mm,
can, you know, there's really only a couple of choices. You can either use that as fuel to
mm,
light a fire and find a passion, and then put that energy into something, right? Focus on something positive and use that fire to do better, like you said, to go the opposite way. Make sure that my kids will never feel the way that I felt growing up,
mm.
right? Or the
Yes,
other
sir.
option is repeat the cycle and have the
Mm,
same, you know, go down the same path. And you hear that a lot with abuse type of stories, right?
mm.
On the negative end of things, guys that get abused then turn around and wind up abusing their kids. And for somebody who doesn't, it's hard to fathom that, but that is the cycle, you know, and it's kind of
Mm,
one or the other, but it's a choice. You get to choose, you get to pick. You don't have to follow that cycle, that downward spiral path of repeating the same mistakes, right? That's so
mm,
through the grit lens, I think that's the message I would want to, you know, to really tie them together.
mm,
Make the choice, flip the switch, right? It's
mm, mhm.
what do if you were failed by your father in any way that you see that being your reality, why on earth would you ever want to make that your kid's reality,
Mm.
right? So flip that switch.
Seriously, man.
Yeah.
Man, you know, one thing that I've learned over this journey for the last 2.5 years, you know, talking with dads from all different racial lines, educational lines, just money wise, just one thing that I've noticed is that we all, like you said, we all have these different, you know, I've met white guys. There's a white guy that I was used to work with who was a single dad. And he was just telling me his story on how his son's mom left them, just left out of nowhere,
Mm.
just walked off, just never came back.
Wow.
And I'm listening to it, I'm like, wow, you know, like this is stuff that a lot of times, you know, you hear about black men that they do. And then I hear it from this guy and his situation. And then, you know, I have a brother who had a situation like that. And then, you know, there's times where one thing that I've learned also is that a lot of guys that I talk to, a lot of white guys that I've talked to, even though their dads were in the home, there was still so many issues there that affected them. You know, like you say, the alcoholism and all of these things. And there's just so many factors on why people weren't there. And it's like I've learned that, man, we all have so many issues, man. You know, we all have these things. And that's why it's like it's so important for us to bond together as dads and be able to lift one another up, because you just never know a person's situation. You know, you can't look at how they look or what they drive or, you know, any of that stuff until you sit down and have a conversation with them and really understand people. And I'm like, wow, bro, I would have never guessed that about you,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and just sitting down and meeting people and getting to know people, I'm like, man, bro, it's so many of us have been failed, you know, as men, you know,
Mm-hmm.
we just didn't have those examples. And at times it's really hard for guys to reverse that cycle because it's like, this is all I know. You know, this is all I've seen. You know, I want to do better, but such a struggle when it's like that's all you've ever saw and that's all you know. So that's why it's important for us to be together also, because we can help one another and teach. You know, it's such an important thing, because it's really hard at times for guys to reverse those cycles. You know, there's generational curses, man. You know, it's passed from generation to generation.
Absolutely.
And so we got to be able to help one another break those things, because they're strongholds, and it's pretty difficult for some guys to break that stuff.
Absolutely. And just having the courage and the willingness to ask for help and go look for the type of influence that you need, right? Like your podcast, this podcast is the type of influence that person that's coming of age, you know, riding the fence, they could go either way. It's about time to make that decision. Although even if you make the wrong decision now, I don't believe that you're stuck. I believe that you can come back. But when you you hit lots of different crossroads in life, whether you come, no matter which side of the spectrum you're on, you know, with having a father in the house, having money growing up, you know, everybody hits those crossroads and you get to make a choice. You have to make a choice, really. And it's a privilege and an opportunity to have that choice to make, being here in America and being as blessed as we are. Some people don't even get the choice, right? So that's a whole nother topic. But if you get the choice and you get to make the right one, and you have that opportunity, don't squander it. You know, don't miss it. Grab that sucker when you have the chance. And having this resource out there, your resource is one. I mean, they say that, you know, you're the average of all the people that you spend time around, right? So if you immerse yourself in 100 hours of great fathers, that it's going to rub off on you. It has to. It's science. If you listen to it, you'll pick up from it. So that's it, man. Just having the courage to put yourself out there and say, I need help, you know, or I need mentoring. You know, that's another common theme with the successful business people that I've been talking to, is they have mentors and coaches and consultants. Like there's like take sports, for example. Kobe Bryant had a coach. I mean, Michael Jordan had a coach. They might have been an old white guy that was, you know, 5'6" and never played at that level. But if that guy studies mechanics for 12 hours a day, and, you know, the physics of the ball going in the hoop, then there's still something you can pick up from and learn from that. You know what I mean? Practicing the basics and having a coach. That's that could be part of great fatherhood that some guys are missing too. If you reach out and ask for some mentoring, how many guys have you talked to that would be more than happy to mentor one if they needed it or if they wanted it? I mean, I would take one on. They could have my phone number, call me up, and we could chat. So it's, you know, that's and so much of it too is practicing the basics, you know, dribbling and passing, blocking and tackling, right? It's just being there for your kid. It's like, it doesn't have to be extravagant. Like you were saying, it doesn't have to be a vacation or a PlayStation 5 or whatever they're on now. Or it's like, it doesn't have to be some big thing. It just being there with them, you know, play a game. It's back to basics.
Yeah, that's some good stuff right there, man.
Yeah. Well, man, we're a little bit over our hour already, so I don't want to be insensitive to your time. I know you got lots of stuff to do, so I really appreciate your time. Man, I'd be happy to do it again sometime if you ever want to talk again. You know, I'd love to get another 100 episodes down and talk again. You know, I mean, see what's different, what's the same. But man, I think you're onto something big. I think you're gaining traction, you know, and I'll definitely recommend it to anybody who I come across. Because your message is solid and much needed.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, sir. And man, I love what you're doing. You know, I'm always, like I say, I'm a podcast listener.
Right.
Man, I'm always looking for something different to hear, you know, just on so many different subjects and topics. So what you're doing, man, is great, is needed, you know, and we need more facilitators to have these conversations, you know, and I think the more conversations like this we have, you know, there's a certain demographic that I'm going to reach, certain, you know, people that will hear from me. And there's certain people that you can reach that I won't ever be able to reach, you know, so we need more out there. You know, the more that we have out speaking to the masses, you know, the more change that we can create. So I'm always encouraged when I see another brother doing, you know, just doing the work, man. So I appreciate your work, man. I encourage you to keep going forward. I know you're early in, you know, you're still fresh. One thing I will tell you is at times it does get discouraging, you know, when the numbers don't look the way you think they should look, when it seems like people aren't paying attention when you think they should be paying attention. But I will say this, you know, if you continue to push forward, people start to catch on. And when they catch on, you know, I catch myself at times thinking like, man, I've been doing this, you know, you should have been doing it, but it is what it is, you know. Right. So, you know, you continue to push forward. Don't get discouraged. I've seen a lot of guys start podcasts and they stop early on because things just didn't seem like it was working or whatever the case may be, but just keep going. Right. Because at times it's going to seem like there's no one listening, bro, but there's always someone out there that's helping push your message forward, you know, telling other people. And you know, you might land that one big interview that gets everyone, right, you know, paying attention. So you just got to keep on going, man. Don't let anything stop you.
But if you're not hustling, then that opportunity won't come, or you'll miss it. Or you'll miss it when it does.
Exactly.
Yep. That's right. No, you're 100% right. And that goes for I tell people a lot. It's about getting over that hump. It's like you know, this discouraging. It might feel like you're trying to bust through a wall with a little tiny finish hammer, but you just keep hacking away at it, away at it, you know, or like digging out of prison with a spoon. People have done it, right? So you just gotta just one scoop at a time, one little scoop.
Seriously.
Yeah. But no, I really appreciate you saying that. It's definitely hard at times. It's a time commitment, you know, like everything is. Everything's a time commitment, but I definitely enjoyed it so far, and we've had some really powerful conversations, you know, like you said, taking away some really good little nuggets that you can apply, you know, today. You can apply right now. Like they're just solid advice that, you know, if you don't have that conversation, you never would have heard it, never would have even probably met that guy, you know what I mean? It's great. It's full of stuff like that. So really appreciate it. I'll publish this and I'll link over to your stuff. And like you said, I got the videos on YouTube, and I'll just like, you have to now, you gotta be where the audience already is, right?
Exactly.
Isn't that what they say?
Exactly.
So, trying to do that too. I'm with you.
Yes, sir. Yeah, man. Right. Hey, listen, you got my contact information, man. Yep. Anytime you need some encouragement, you need some help, reach out, man.
Yeah.
I'm there for you.
Appreciate that. Absolutely.
Yes,
cool.
Sir.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks again. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
All right. Sounds good, my boy.
All right, man. Thank you.
Yes,
Have
sir.
a good one.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to the Grit Growth Podcast with host Carson Stefanelli and Matt Webster. We sincerely hope you were inspired by the interview and found at least one useful tool or tactic to implement in your own life. Now, level up by taking immediate action. Apply one lesson learned to your life as soon as possible to make sure it sticks. Post it and tag us to increase accountability. You can join the Grit Growth movement to restore American grit to its former glory by building an unprecedented force of conquerors, both in business and in life, at www.gritgrowth.org and wherever you're active on the socials. Please also drop a rating and review on your podcast app, as it goes a long way in helping the movement gain traction. Now, don't let this inspiration go to waste. Commit to conquer. Lead your life. Leave a legacy. Gather your grit and go get after it.